The story begins with a boy awakening in complete darkness. He opens his eyes, but he cannot see absolutely anything, becoming confused and without any idea of where he is. For a few moments, everything remains empty, until he notices a faint glow slowly appearing in front of him. Little by little, this light intensifies, and he realizes that it comes from inside what seems to be an eggshell. Part of this shell is cracked, creating a small opening that allows him to see the outside. Through it, he notices that he is in the middle of a forest. This only raises even more questions, especially when he realizes that he cannot move his own body in any way at all. Before he can organize his thoughts, a status screen suddenly appears in front of him. Upon reading the information, he becomes completely frozen in shock. Because the system clearly indicates that he is a dragon egg, the confusion only increases. Soon after, the status window expands, now fully visible, and a divine voice announces that this interface displays all of his current abilities, accompanied by numerical values to make understanding easier. Still disoriented, he tries to speak to the divine voice, demanding an explanation for what is happening. However, the voice calmly responds that it still cannot explain everything, because he is still at level 1. This answer only makes him more irritated. In an act of frustration, he tries to move and ends up lightly shaking his body, which causes him to fall from the tree where he was resting. He hits the ground and begins rolling uncontrollably down a slope until he finally falls into a river. When he stops there, he realizes that he can see his reflection in the water. When he looks closely, he is shocked to notice that his reflected image is, in fact, a dragon egg. Realizing how lost he is, the divine voice decides to help him a little more and finally offers him a proper explanation. It confirms that he truly is a dragon egg, classified in that world as a rank F monster. If his shell were to be completely broken, he would die instantly, which means that creating that small opening to see had already been extremely dangerous. The divine voice continues explaining that, despite dragon eggs being at the base of the food chain, they possess the potential to grow and become terrifying dragons over time. However, this is only possible if they manage to survive long enough, which is not easy, since dragon eggs are considered a highly prized delicacy by various monsters. As they obviously do not have legs, the only form of locomotion is rolling. Even after hearing all of this, he still cannot fully understand what is happening to him. Remaining still seems extremely risky, so he decides to start rolling as fast as he can, trying to move away from danger. Unfortunately, this causes him to fall again. Plunging from a small cliff, he realizes that he has been falling quite a lot lately, and because of this, the system announces that his endurance has increased from level 1 to level 2. Even so, the fall reduces his hit points, reminding him that he needs to be more careful. Upon realizing that he is injured and exhausted, he decides to sleep for a while to recover his strength. As expected, when he wakes up, his hit points are completely restored. This confirms that resting fully recovers his health bar, which brings him a small sense of relief in this strange and dangerous situation. After that, he continues rolling while reflecting to himself, imagining what exactly will happen when he finally leaves that form. He wonders if one day he will become a gigantic dragon, and if he will be forced to fight alone against relentless enemies just to survive. As he moves forward, lost in his thoughts, he suddenly stops when he notices a giant insect not very far away. Sensing danger, he quickly hides behind a tree and uses his appraisal ability. The result reveals that the creature is called an egg devourer. As soon as the insect notices him, it immediately advances in his direction, making it clear that it intends to kill him. He begins to roll as fast as he can, but soon realizes that he will not be able to escape forever. Maintaining that pace, sooner or later he would be caught. With this, he understands that he needs to find a way to turn the tables. The monster chases him to the edge of a cliff. At the moment when the creature leaps toward him, trying to swallow him whole, he dodges at the last second. Using all the strength he has, he collides with the monster and manages to push it off the cliff. The creature plunges down the slope and dies instantly. That becomes the first battle he has ever won in his entire life. The system immediately announces that he has gained 12 experience points and that he has now reached level 5. As a result, all of his statistics are completely maximized. In addition, he meets the requirements to evolve, receiving the option to choose between becoming a baby dragon or a small dragon. Not knowing exactly what the difference is, the system explains, the small dragon is described as a common race of dragons, considered small only in comparison to others of the same species. Even so, when fully developed, it is still larger than a bear and is known for its powerful fire breath. The baby dragon, on the other hand, is not well suited for combat due to its short claws and small fangs, but it possesses enormous potential, being able to evolve into several different species of dragons in the future. However, baby dragons are considered an extremely valuable delicacy, both for monsters and for adventurers, which means that they are constantly hunted wherever they appear. Faced with this, the choice of the small dragon seems obvious, since it is the safest option for survival. However, soon after making his decision, the divine voice envelops him in a warm manner and tells him not to limit himself, explaining that it has great expectations for him and that he should always strive for something greater. Upon hearing this, he feels confused and begins to wonder if he truly made the right choice. After all, he chose the safest option, not the riskiest one, as he recalls how the system works. This doubt continues to echo in his mind. The divine voice had mentioned that the baby dragon possessed enormous potential, capable of evolving in many different ways in the future. Thinking about this, he begins to suspect that the small dragon might have a more limited evolutionary path, or that, after a certain point, it might no longer be able to grow fully. This idea keeps pounding in his mind. Taking this into consideration, he finally makes his decision and chooses to evolve into a baby dragon. He does not want to live with regrets later on, even knowing that this choice may be dangerous. He prefers to take the risk rather than wonder in the future if it was fear that made him limit himself. He wants to believe that the decision was truly his, without deceiving himself or choosing the easiest path merely for the sake of safety. The system accepts his choice without hesitation and carries out the evolution immediately. His body begins to change, undergoing a visible transformation until it takes on the form of a small yellow dragon, exactly as he had chosen. Along with the evolution, he acquires a large number of new abilities, and all of his previous statistics increase significantly compared to what they were before. Even so, his hit points and mana do not recover automatically after the evolution. He remains exhausted, which makes it clear that he will need to rest before exerting himself again. Almost at the same instant he realizes this, his stomach growls loudly, making it evident that he also needs to eat as soon as possible. When he looks toward the place where he defeated the creature earlier, he realizes that the worm he killed now looks surprisingly appetizing. He understands that, if he wants to continue growing stronger, he will need protein. With this thought, his dragon instincts awaken completely. Without hesitation, he devours the worm. After that, he lies down and falls asleep. When he wakes up the next morning, he feels full of energy, renewed after a good night of rest. He then heads to the river to observe his reflection. At that moment, he finally accepts that he was reincarnated in that world. What intrigues him the most, however, is the fact that he has no memories of his previous life. He does not know who he was, how he lived, or even whether he was a boy or a girl. All of that simply disappeared. While reflecting on this, he notices movement behind him and turns around, spotting several dark worms approaching. This time, instead of fleeing, he charges straight into the attack. Using his new abilities, he defeats the first wave quickly. As he continues fighting, he unlocks even more skills, making the combat increasingly simple and efficient. After defeating them all, hunger returns. However, he has no desire to eat those dark worms, as he remembers the horrible taste from the last time. Then, he finds some mushrooms nearby and decides to try them. This decision soon proves to be a mistake, as he quickly discovers that they are poisonous. After suffering from the effects, he decides that he will never eat mushrooms again. With this lesson learned, he ventures deeper into the forest in search of better prey, since he does not want to survive by feeding only on worms. After exploring for a while, he finds a gray wolf. Even though it is larger than him, The dragon manages to use his weak breath and dragon punch to defeat it. After the victory, he lightly burns the wolf's hide. When he smells it, he realizes that it resembles barbecue. Driven by curiosity, he uses his dragon breath again to roast the meat more thoroughly. When he finally takes a bite, he discovers that the flavor is incredible. Later, he encounters another gray wolf and defeats it almost instantly. With that, he reaches level 20 out of 25, realizing that he still needs to gain 5 more levels in order to evolve again. As soon as the wolf falls, he repeats the previous process, showing that he is already starting to get used to the life of a dragon. Hunting, fighting, and eating in this way begins to feel natural. Even so, despite growing stronger, he feels the weight of loneliness. The only voice he speaks with is the divine voice, and this starts to leave him bored and isolated. He is surprised to realize that he wishes he had a friend by his side. That desire is fulfilled faster than he imagined. A short time later, he hears voices coming from afar. He cannot understand the language being spoken, but he feels relieved to recognize them as human voices. Quickly, he hides behind a tree and observes carefully. He sees a small group of adventurers approaching. At first, he thinks about revealing himself and trying to communicate, but he soon remembers that he is a dragon. Fear arises of being attacked as soon as he is seen. Even so, he thinks that, because he is small, he might appear harmless or even cute. He even considers that they might treat him like a pet. Filled with hope, he steps out from behind the tree and places himself in front of them, trying to appear as adorable and harmless as possible. Unfortunately, the plan fails completely. The adventurers do not see him as something innocent, but rather as prey and valuable meat. Without hesitation, the leader of the group attacks him, plunging the sword into his chest. Immediately afterward, the man uses magic that numbs his entire body, preventing him from moving normally. He desperately tries to escape, but his muscles do not respond due to the paralysis. Helpless, he watches the adventurers slowly approach, clearly preparing to kill him. At that moment, he realizes how naive he was to believe that a dragon could befriend humans. After all the effort to survive and evolve, it seems that everything is about to end in a cruel and meaningless way. Just as the leader raises his weapon to deliver the final blow, a female adventurer steps forward and stops him. She questions whether it is really necessary to kill such a small, cute, and innocent-looking dragon. Confused, the protagonist wonders why he is still alive. A few seconds later, he feels a sensation of warmth spreading throughout his body. When he lifts his gaze, he realizes that the adventurer is using healing magic. He quickly uses his appraisal ability and discovers that her name is Miriam. Even though she is almost out of mana, she decides to heal him completely. While Miriam speaks to him, the system announces that he has acquired the human language comprehension skill, allowing him to gradually understand the language as the skill's level increases. However, this brief moment of calm and kindness does not last long. Suddenly, screams echo in the distance, loud and desperate. Miriam immediately recognizes those voices as belonging to her companions. Without thinking twice, she tries to run toward the sound to help them. Before she can get away, he grabs her arm tightly, clearly showing how distressed he is. He tries to stop her, warning that whatever is happening ahead is far too dangerous for her to face alone. Even so, Miriam breaks free and runs, ignoring the warning and leaving him behind. Watching her leave, the protagonist realizes that he cannot simply stand still while the girl who saved his life is in danger. Gathering his courage, he forces his body to move and runs after her. When he finally reaches the location, his heart sinks at the sight before his eyes. Miriam is facing a terrible monster, a stone dragon, classified as a level C enemy. The situation is even worse when he realizes that the creature has 197 hit points, which means that an absurd amount of damage would be required to defeat it. Miriam is already injured. At the moment she screams, the stone dragon turns all of its attention toward him, staring at that gigantic creature that is now watching him directly. He feels fear take over his body. His muscles lock up. His mind falls into conflict, and he wonders if this is how everything will end. Unable to move, paralyzed by terror and doubt, he feels that he is standing at the edge of the end, and thus, the first episode comes to an end. Luckily, Dragu manages to dodge the attack at the very last instant. As he moves, he thinks that he made a huge mistake by believing that the four of them could defeat that creature. When he was a child, he would never have imagined something like this. As he looks at Miriam, he realizes that she has very few hit points left, and, to make matters worse, the small dragon begins to advance slowly in her direction. Desperate, Dragu tries to help her, but he is interrupted by a voice that echoes, ordering him to run away. It insists that he leave immediately, because facing that creature is impossible. Dragu understands perfectly, without any doubt, there is no real chance of victory. Even knowing that the voice is right, he cannot abandon the girl. He decides, then, to do everything within his power. He starts rolling quickly across the ground, dodging the monster's attacks with such precision that he looks like a true master of evasion. In a short time, he realizes that the older man in the group is already dead. The other companion is still breathing, but he is unconscious and bleeding. Dragu understands that he needs to draw the monster away somehow. Without wasting time, he advances, rolling and attacking to provoke the creature. The dragon, which is small in name only, becomes enraged and begins to chase him. At least, that was what Dragu expected. However, the monster activates one of its abilities, causing a massive earthquake that leaves him completely immobilized. Dragu complains, realizing that that miserable creature is far too strong. Filled with rage, he throws a punch with his fist wrapped in flames, but the dragon simply activates its regeneration, recovering all of its hit points with extreme ease. At that moment, Dragu understands that there is nothing more he can do there. In the end, he decides to grab Miriam and flee from the place. There is no way to save everyone, but at least he can save one life. He carries her with him, moving away from the danger zone. Already far from there, he watches with concern as Miriam's HP continues to drop and, unfortunately, he has no healing abilities. Even so, Miriam is human, and that means there is a solution. If he wants to save her, he needs to take her to a human village. Following a faint, characteristic scent, Dragu hurries on, but soon realizes that the path is surrounded by a pack of gray wolves. They encircle them quickly, leaving no room to escape. With no alternative, Dragu fights the wolves to drive them away. During the struggle, Miriam briefly opens her eyes and, in a confused state, sees the small Dragu struggling against the beasts. Soon after, she loses consciousness again. As the night continues to advance, Dragu keeps carrying Miriam, already at the limit of his strength. By luck, he manages to reach the village. Without wasting time, he begins shouting for help, asking the villagers for assistance. However, they only hear roars and, feeling threatened, they attack, wounding his leg with a blade. Trying to make them understand, he realizes that it is useless. Then, he abandons Miriam's body, trusting that they will be able to help her, and quickly flees back into the forest. As he moves away, he understands that the more he tries to approach humans, the more they will see him only as a dragon, a monster. As if that were not enough, the voice of God appears once again, informing him that he has received a new title, rising from the insignificant level of Hero 1. 2 days pass, and Miriam finally awakens. Confused, she wonders where she is, until she notices a red-haired elf by her side. Realizing that she is in a village, the elf, named Muriel, explains that she used excessive white magic to heal her, and that now Miriam needs to rest. Miriam asks who brought her there and what happened to her companions. Muriel replies that the dwarf is dead, found as if he had been crushed by an enormous rock. As for the others, their bodies were not located, and everything indicates that they were devoured. Miriam collapses to the ground, crying, realizing that she is the only survivor. She blames herself, believing that she could have prevented everything. Muriel asks her to calm down, explaining that God has always done whatever he wanted. What matters is that she is alive now, thanks to someone who saved her. Muriel says that the dwarf was a good person, responsible for driving monsters away from the village and serving as an example for the children. However, one night, she heard comments at the tavern saying that he would never defeat a stone dragon. Offended, he decided to prove them wrong, practically killing himself out of pride. Because of that, he dragged GR and Miriam into forming a group, taking advantage of Muriel's absence and falsely claiming that he had her permission. Miriam knew that Muriel had warned them not to go near the dragon, but she ended up giving in to the pressure and her sense of guilt. She says that she agreed to accompany them only on the condition that they would retreat if the situation became dangerous. Unfortunately, things did not go as planned. Muriel states that the dwarf died because of his pride and congratulates Miriam for surviving such severe injuries. Excited, Miriam states that someone must certainly have carried her to the village. Muriel dismisses that idea, saying that they found signs of a monster attacking the village entrance, but that Gregory's group managed to repel the threat. Miriam insists that she passed out during the fight and that it is impossible for her to have escaped on her own. Muriel tries to convince her that strong blows can cause memory loss. Miriam accepts the possibility, but as she remembers Dragu fighting the wolves, she asks Muriel what those creatures were like. The monster that had been beside her was no longer there, although Miriam could not explain the reason. When they noticed its absence, they realized that it had simply disappeared. Maria asks whether Miriam is worried about something, but she prefers not to go into details. Even so, the subject continues to circle her thoughts, especially when she wonders whether that monster could be the same small dragon she had run into before. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Dragu gets up as if nothing had happened. He silently thanks the metabolism of dragons, along with a good period of rest. In his thoughts, he hopes that the girl is doing well. When he recalls the battle, he acknowledges that he was extremely weak in that confrontation. He believed that after evolving he would already be a bit stronger, but that fight revealed an absurd difference between him and a dragon, even one considered small. This awakens in Dragu a strong desire to become far more powerful. He feels that the time has come to act. With a change of scenery, he uses an egg eater to summon his allies, thus creating a perfect opportunity to gain experience. At that moment, the voice of God announces that he has received the title of the Path of Evil, something that leaves him slightly offended. Dragu quickly defeats the egg eaters, rises to level 25, and once again meets the requirements to evolve. Seeking the best place for the transformation, he goes to a lake and agrees to view the evolution options presented by the voice of God. 5 paths appear: Calamity, Marbleast, Angelic Child, Small Dragon, and Dragon Hatchling. The voice explains that the small dragon grows quickly and is safer at the beginning, but has limited potential, while the Dragon Hatchling offers a much more promising future. Dragu also analyzes the other options: the Child Dragon, his natural and safest evolution; the Marbleast one, focused on durability and mana; and the Angelic Dragon, with healing abilities but little offensive power. The juvenile Calamity represents the beginning of an evil path, although a reversible one. Even reluctant about the idea of becoming a Calamity, Dragu finds himself intrigued upon learning that this type of dragon is extremely intelligent and can assume a humanoid form, allowing it to infiltrate among humans. Still bothered by the meaning of this choice, he ends the chapter undecided, reflecting on which path to follow. He reflects on the idea of becoming a young plague dragon, and soon concludes that this might not be such a smart choice, since wherever he looks, that kind of power still frightens him. His greatest concern continues to be Miria's, and because of that, he wishes, no matter what happens, to obtain the ability of human transformation. After thinking for a long time, the protagonist comes to the conclusion that if he could learn this transformation, he might be able to experience a simple and righteous life. Even if everything went wrong, there would always be the possibility of turning back. With that in mind, he makes a sudden decision and chooses to evolve into a young plague dragon. His body transforms immediately, accompanied by the divine voice, which announces his evolution from a baby plague dragon to a higher stage. Despite it being exactly what he had chosen, the protagonist looks at his reflection in the water and feels his confidence waver. He no longer resembles the small, adorable dragon he used to be. The more he observes himself, the more his appearance seems dark and threatening. The divine voice then informs him that his status has increased from level 2 to level 3, now allowing him to review the details of his abilities. The level of the divine voice itself has also risen from 1 to 2, and he has acquired the abilities of flight and dragon scale dust. Upon hearing this, the protagonist feels satisfied for a moment. However, the divine voice continues, explaining that his bite has evolved into venomous fangs, that he has obtained a dark and sickening breath, as well as claws with paralyzing poison. All of these abilities sound extremely dangerous. He responds to the divine voice by saying that he did not need any of that. But it goes on to inform him that he also received the title of friendship, and that the curse increased from level 1 to level 2. With so much information, the protagonist begins to think that this decision might have been a huge mistake. To make matters worse, there is no mention at all of the long-awaited human transformation. This makes him think that he has ended up becoming something close to death itself, although he tries to convince himself that he might simply need to gain more levels to unlock that ability. The divine voice, however, states that it cannot provide explanations of that kind at level 3. Defeated, the protagonist feels miserable as he realizes that he gained so many strange abilities instead of the human transformation he desired. He then decides to review everything on his own and tries to learn more about the divine voice ability, questioning whose voice it truly is. The answer is direct. Explanations of that kind cannot be given at this level. Something he already suspected. Faced with that, he decides to analyze other abilities, such as dragon scale dust. The divine voice explains that when the dragon flaps its wings, it spreads a debilitating miasma that affects everything around it. At higher levels, this power would be capable of annihilating entire nations simply by flying over them. The protagonist carefully moves his wings, but that simple action kills a nearby flower, causing him to panic. He does not like the idea of being a walking biological weapon at all and complains that a warning would have been useful. The dust came out just from the movement of his wings, something that would never have happened if he were still human. The explanation continues with the sickening breath, described as an attack that spreads a disease-laden miasma. It not only causes severe illnesses, but is also extremely contagious, and, in the past, was responsible for the complete destruction of an entire civilization. Upon hearing this, the protagonist falls into complete despair, saying that nothing could possibly be more evil than that and wondering whether he will still be able to follow a righteous path. He then decides to analyze his titles, since they seem to strongly influence his evolution. The divine voice explains that hero is a title granted to those who represent modest and kind values, and who may one day become true heroes. This title slightly increases damage with certain weapons and has a strong impact on the evolutionary path. The protagonist does not reject this idea, as he believes it might prevent him from following an evil path. Next, the divine voice describes the title of malefactor, intended for cruel villains who leave piles of corpses behind. It slightly increases the damage of dark attacks, makes learning white magic more difficult, and reduces the overall recovery rate, while also strongly influencing evolution. Upon hearing this, the protagonist interrupts the explanation, stating that this is the worst ability he has ever heard of in his entire life. He begins to seriously believe that he made the wrong choice. Desperate, he asks the divine voice to take him back and says that he wants to return to being an innocent baby, deeply regretting his decision. Meanwhile, Mariel and Miriam check all the stones that protect the village. Mariel explains that these stones create a barrier that prevents monsters from entering. But in truth, the enchantment only subconsciously discourages them. Creatures with strong will or clear objectives can still pass through the protection. Miria supposes that this includes the monsters seen the other day. But Mariel states that there is no certainty, since no one saw it clearly. Even so, Miria believes that it might have been trying to help, especially after seeing it fight against the wolves. Mariel comments that if it had entered the village, it would mean the spell was broken, which would be a serious problem. But it would also indicate that it could return. Because of that, they decide to move on to the next enchantment and check whether everything is in order. After finishing, Miria asks if she can learn more about monsters, but Mariel notes that she has been strangely obsessed with them since the incident. Miria confesses that she cannot get out of her head the feeling of having been saved by a small dragon in the forest. Mariel immediately interrupts her, asking whether she might be developing feelings for a monster. Miria quickly denies it, although she hesitates for a brief moment. Despite her insecurity, Mariel decides to explain more about monsters, She says that they can evolve into different forms, growing stronger with each evolution, which happens by hunting other creatures. They level up, just like humans, who also possess their own levels. Miriam comments that humans can also evolve, improve their abilities, and level up by accumulating experience. Mariel confirms this and explains that, in the case of monsters, each species has a different maximum limit. When they reach that limit, they evolve into a higher form. This process repeats itself several times and, as time goes on, monsters take on increasingly powerful appearances. Miriam says it is hard to believe that people in the past managed to understand the true nature of monsters. Mariel then asks what she is talking about, since that explanation had already been given before and the event mentioned happened only 11 years ago. Miriam admits that she does not remember any of that, because at the time she was only 5 years old and still knew very little about the world. Mariel agrees that she is right, and Miriam comments that she was so small back then that she had to look up to see her. Mariel responds with an irritated look. Miriam quickly realizes that she touched on a sensitive topic, since Mariel is sensitive when it comes to her height. Even if that is probably true, Mariel denies it and completely changes the subject. She explains that, from time to time, special people appear who are capable of hearing the divine voice, which shares information about monsters, levels, and other similar matters. As happens with heroes or saints, it was thanks to these people that such knowledge spread, and not through simple trial and error. Monsters fight to survive, gain experience, and seek evolution. In other words, they are all driven to seek power and become more ferocious. Even if that dragon saved Miriam's life, the next time their paths cross, it will have evolved into something far more dangerous and will turn its fangs and claws against her. Miriam tries to say something, but stops halfway through. Mariel warns her not to create strange expectations regarding monsters. They are the embodiment of the instinct to fight, and that makes them incompatible with humans. Miriam has no choice but to accept those words, thinking that even that small dragon who saved her will one day change as it evolves. Meanwhile, the protagonist decides to level up as quickly as possible and return to the path he has chosen. After all, he intends to become a hero, not a demon king. To begin with, he wants to learn about human transformation and go to the city, because he wants to see her again, especially Miriam. Without wasting time, he starts searching for weaker monsters around him to gain experience quickly. Suddenly, moving becomes difficult. He notices threads wrapping around his body, preventing any movement. At that moment, he senses the presence of a huge monster behind him, but it is not the type of spider he had imagined. The protagonist quickly checks his attributes and discovers that it is an extremely powerful Taranturok. He understands that he has no chance of defeating it now. But before he can even try to flee, the spider fires its web. Immediately, he uses his baby dragon breath to burn the threads, but ends up setting his own body on fire in the process. While rolling on the ground trying to put out the flames, the divine voice announces that he has acquired fire resistance. As soon as he manages to stand up, he quickly advances to check how much damage he dealt to the spider. The Taranturok still has 62 health points out of a total of 78. Which shows that the attack was not as effective as he had hoped. With few options left, he decides to use his claws, activating the poisonous and paralyzing claws ability for the first time. After attacking repeatedly, he retreats and checks his own status, realizing that he now has only 42 health points. The Taranturok's condition shows light exhaustion, partial paralysis, and total fury, which is definitely not a good sign. The protagonist does not understand how this is possible, since the spider still has half of its life remaining. He realizes that he has only made the situation worse. Deciding that he needs to get out of there immediately, while the monster is still partially paralyzed, he uses his rolling ability to escape. However, the paralysis quickly fades, and the enraged spider begins chasing him. At that moment, he remembers that he can fly, but his small wings do not allow him to go very far. He becomes confused when he cannot actually fly, which indicates that his level is still low. With no time to think, he uses the rolling ability again to flee. After 10 full minutes of non-stop rolling, the spider is still chasing him, showing no signs of fatigue. The The divine voice informs him that the rolling ability has increased from level 2 to level 3. This gives him a bit of hope, and he starts to believe that he can survive, since he is now faster. The divine voice then announces that he has received the title of Running Chicken. The protagonist immediately asks if that means he is being called a coward. He explains that he would face the spider if he had any chance of winning. But that is clearly not the case. The situation worsens when he realizes that he is approaching a cliff and knows that a fall would certainly kill him. He thinks about turning right before the edge, but soon considers that he might be able to escape if he reaches the other side. Even knowing that his flying ability is unreliable, he decides to jump with all the speed he can muster, betting everything on that attempt. At the highest point of the jump, he opens his wings and tries to use the wind in his favor to reach the other side. To his surprise, it works better than expected. He manages to escape, although he is completely exhausted. The protagonist believes he has shaken off the spider, but panics when he realizes that it has created a bridge of webs to continue the pursuit. Forced to flee desperately, he crashes through several monsters along the way, gaining large amounts of experience thanks to his special title, which causes him to quickly rise to level 8. Feeling stronger, he decides to stop running and finally face the spider. After analyzing his abilities and enduring a powerful poison thanks to the resistance he acquired, the protagonist deceives the spider by pretending to be dead and defeats it with a decisive tail attack. The victory takes him straight to level 14. In addition to unlocking new abilities, although the long-awaited human transformation still does not appear, which leaves him frustrated. Exhausted, he finds a cave and decides to use it as a base. There, he prepares an improvised meal with strange fruits that improve the flavor of the meat, which unexpectedly earns him the title of Lord Chef. Despite being satisfied, he reflects bitterly on his monstrous appearance and the fact that he is now seen as an enemy of humanity. Meanwhile, in the village, Miriam becomes worried upon learning that two figures were seen near a lake. Even though she wants to go search for them, she is stopped by Mariel, who decides to ask the guild for help. The next day, the protagonist wakes up recovered, but strange problems arise when he tries to view his own status. After intense pain, his ability evolves once again, although his vision remains blurred, ending the episode with even more mysteries surrounding his new form. The young woman insists on entering the forest no matter what, showing an almost stubborn determination. However, her friend immediately objects, stating that this would be a terrible idea, since she would not be able to do anything on her own inside there. The forest is far too dangerous, full of monsters and unknown risks. The girl, however, responds firmly that Dops is still alive and that she feels this deep in her heart. Faced with this statement, her friend questions why he has not returned to the village after so much time. The young woman admits that she does not know the exact reason, only that something prevents her from giving up. Her friend, being more rational, comments that she will ask the villagers for help to form an organized search party. For that reason, she asks her to stop wanting to go into the forest alone all the time, because they cannot put the lives of other people in the village at risk because of an impulsive decision. Thus, she decides that the best course of action is to request that the guild investigate the case, since the adventurers should arrive soon to help. Upon hearing this, the girl realizes that she acted rashly and apologizes for her irrational behavior. The scene shifts to Dragon, who wakes up in a good mood, quite satisfied for having managed to sleep deeply and also feed properly after such a long time. His body feels stronger and more stable, and this excites him. Now, he decides that it is time to evolve once again and try, at last, to reach the long-desired human transformation. As he walks, he carefully observes the environment around him. Looking ahead, he notices something strange on the ground, a suspicious-looking slime. He begins to wonder what exactly that might be. He is certain that it cannot be just an ordinary puddle of water and, driven by curiosity, decides to get closer to find out what it is. Even so, he remains cautious, imagining that it could be some kind of monster. As he gets closer, he realizes that the creature does not seem as strong as other enemies he has already faced. This makes him think that he could use that being to farm experience points. With this idea in mind, he decides to check the creature's attributes. However, as soon as he tries to observe its statistics, His head begins to ache intensely, and his eyes burn. A system message echoes in his mind, informing him that the ability to view statistics still does not provide an accurate reading at level 3. Shortly after, as a response to the forced attempt, his ability rises to level 4. Even so, the boy feels intrigued, wondering what kind of monster is actually standing before him. Without any warning, the beast lunges forward and attacks him by surprise. Startled, he runs away and quickly hides behind a tree, trying to catch his breath. He understands that this is not something he should deal with carelessly. Even so, he remembers that the attributes he managed to see were not impressive at all. Still, he decides to avoid a direct confrontation for the time being and continues walking through the forest. Shortly afterward, he finds something on the ground and thinks, for a moment, that it might just be an abandoned bucket of apples. However, when he touches the object, he discovers too late that it is a disguised monster, taking a direct hit to the face. When he checks its statistics, he realizes that it is a rank D monster. Determined to defeat it, he advances and uses his strongest attack, but is surprised to notice that the creature is far more resistant than he had imagined, taking only 1 point of damage. When he tries to grab it to finish off the rest of its life, he realizes that the monster has completely regenerated. Even by pushing himself to the limit, he cannot deal any damage at all. Frustrated, he begins to wonder if that creature might not know how to swim and decides to test this possibility. By throwing the monster into the sea, he finally manages to defeat it, gaining 36 experience points. Thanks to the effect of the little walking egg, he receives extra experience points, leveling up from level 14 to level 15. In addition, he receives the title of Despicable King, and the Malefactor skill rises from level 2 to level 3. Before he can even react, the Snail Gang appears to avenge their defeated companion. He realizes that, while falling into the sea, the monster had used some ability to communicate with the others. Even so, without feeling fear, he decides to attack head-on. He knocks one of them down quickly and, with a single powerful blow, defeats all the others with extreme ease. Soon after, he receives the Meteorite skill, feeling satisfied that this attack now officially counts as a skill. After defeating all the monsters before him, he gains 595 experience points. Because of the Walking Egg's title, he jumps directly from level 15 to level 30. His flight skill goes from level 1 to level 2, and the ability to view statistics rises from level 4 to level 5. The dragon feels quite satisfied for having shattered the enemy's shells and, at the same time, obtained enough meat and evolved several levels all at once. However, at that moment, he feels a little lost. Besides meat, he desires vegetables, since he knows they are very important for a balanced diet. Nevertheless, despite being at such a high level, he has still not learned human transformation. There are 10 levels left until his next evolution, and he wonders if it will really take that long for him to learn how to become human. Suddenly, he hears a strange sound coming from ahead. When he looks, he thinks it is just an ordinary bear, but upon closer observation, he realizes that he has never seen anything like it before. It is a bear made of clay, something extremely unusual. Curious, he tries to analyze the monster's attributes, but his status display indicates that the creature is too far away for an accurate reading. As he moves closer, he confirms his suspicions. It is a clay bear, a rank D monster, made entirely of clay, extremely powerful, and with great regenerative ability. Upon further analysis, he realizes that the monster is at the same level as him. Watching it carefully, he believes that he can defeat it. If he manages to do so, he will be able to freely shape the clay and fire it. When he attacks the beast, it skillfully defends itself using clay spikes, forcing the dragon to retreat after a few blows. By observing the enemy's health bar, he realizes that there is still a lot of energy left. In addition, the creature has the same regeneration ability as the previous monster. He tries to use his speed-based attack to defeat it, but even when he lands a hit, the monster regenerates once again. From this, he understands that he can defeat it if he continues reducing its movement points. However, when he tries to attack once more, the creature summons a powerful sandstorm. The dragon is left in shock, as he did not imagine that a monster of that type would have such a terrifying power. In the midst of the storm, the beast ends up transforming. which he understands as a kind of trick. Now, he realizes that he will not be able to hit it with the rolling attack, causing his initial strategy to completely fall apart. Even so, he notices that the beast's MP is decreasing rapidly, which means that there is still a chance of victory. Soon after, the creature launches an attack. The dragon dodges with relative ease, remaining cautious, and counterattacks with precision. Tearing off the beast's arm, he realizes that the clay becomes much weaker when separated from the main body. Using this to his advantage, he shapes the torn-off clay as if it were a sphere and strikes it with meteorite, blowing apart half of the monster's body. After defeating the creature, the dragon gains another 150 experience points, in addition to 150 extra bonus points. With that, he rises from level 30 to level 33 and unlocks the Nutcracker skill upon striking the beast, despite the battle having been extremely difficult. He finally obtains the clay he wanted to decorate his home. After that, he sets out in search of more meat and some vegetables. Upon reaching the forest, he finds an extremely nutritious mushroom, but also a poisonous one, capable of causing paralysis for a long period of time. Since he does not have resistance to this poison, he decides to discard it. Continuing his search, he encounters a carnivorous plant, manages to defeat it, realizes that it contains many nutrients, and decides to take it home. The scene shifts once again to the same girl, who ends up deciding to go out alone through the forest. Ignoring her friend's advice, she mentally apologizes to Marielle for doing this and breaking her trust, even though she had promised that she would call the guild staff to help her. Even knowing that the chances of finding the man are minimal, she decides to look for him anyway. After all, some fishermen claim to have seen him passing through the forest, and even with only a 1% chance of finding him, she chooses to move forward. Determined to try to save her friend's life, she understands that if she had stopped the two of them from the beginning, perhaps none of this would have happened in this way. This thought weighs heavily on her mind, making guilt try to take over. Still, she knows that there is no point in continuing to punish herself for something that can no longer be changed. Taking a deep breath, she decides to move forward, walking through the dense forest in the hope of finding Daz alive. Each step is taken carefully, her senses alert to any strange movement around her. When she least expects it, she is suddenly surprised by a monster that appears abruptly among the trees. Frightened, but reacting on instinct, she manages to launch her fire strike in time to defend herself. After the attack, her heart races, and she realizes just how nervous she is. With that, she understands that she needs to calm down quickly, because acting under tension would only increase the chances of making fatal mistakes. The scene then returns to the dragon, who ends up encountering a rank D monster while exploring the region. As time passes, the creature begins to display increasingly aggressive behavior. However, he knows that if he manages to defeat it, the monster will end up transforming into a vegetable with a flavor very similar to meat. This information sparks his culinary curiosity, and soon he starts imagining that he could prepare a beautiful ramen using all the ingredients he has been gathering so far. While thinking about this, he looks to the side and ends up finding something even more surprising. A ranka mushroom. It is an extremely valuable item, known for its incredibly rare potential. If someone managed to cultivate it successfully, it would be possible to revitalize an entire nation whose economy was in decline. The dragon is genuinely impressed by that discovery, since he could earn an absurd amount of money from it in the future. However, he also remembers that this mushroom has extremely dangerous hallucinogenic properties, capable of causing a strong sensation of euphoria. About 500 years ago, it was discovered that it could be ground up and mixed with stimulant drugs, which ended up creating a huge number of addicts and causing serious social problems. Aware of this, he decides to store the mushroom carefully, without making immediate use of it. Moving forward in his exploration, he finds a tree loaded with ripe fruits. Without hesitation, he decides to harvest all of them, making the most of that opportunity and not leaving a single one behind. Meanwhile, in another part of the forest, the girl continues desperately searching for her friend. After walking for some more time, she decides that she will take just one more round through the area, and if she does not find any sign of him, she plans to return home before night falls. The scene returns once again to the protagonist, who has finally managed to gather all the ingredients needed to cook. Carefully, he prepares a soup so well made that the aroma alone is enough to make one's mouth water. After devouring a huge bowl of the soup, he feels deep satisfaction and receives the title of Mr. Cook, which rises from level 1 to level 3. Even so, he realizes that drinking directly from the bowl is not the most practical or comfortable way. Thinking about improving his quality of life, he decides that he will create a hammock or some kind of appropriate utensil to make meals easier in the future. The scene shifts to the next day, when a group of people travels in a carriage along the main road. They are the adventurers that the guild sent to investigate the place where the man had disappeared. Everyone looks alert and prepared for any unexpected situation that might arise during the mission. Then, the story returns to the protagonist, who is hunting various types of wolves, mainly taking advantage of the creature's hides. However, when he returns to the forest where he had left his supplies, he is faced with an irritating situation. A group of monkeys is devouring all of his dried meat. He knows that if he leaves the place even for a moment, they will eat everything. With no alternatives, he understands that he needs to deal with this as quickly as possible and begins to think about creating some kind of potion to handle those monkeys efficiently. After continuing to hunt for some more time through the forest, he ends up coming across a monster he had never seen before. The creature has a strange and intimidating appearance. When he least expects it, he is attacked by surprise. Luckily, he manages to dodge at the very last instant, avoiding a direct blow. Even so, he does not come out unscathed. He ends up taking a heavy impact, loses his balance, falls to the ground, and passes out. The beast remains there, watching the unconscious protagonist and letting out a disturbing laugh, as if it were enjoying the entire situation. Upon awakening, the dragon realizes that he is perfectly oriented, without any mental confusion or loss of consciousness. This surprises him. Considering what had happened moments earlier, he begins to wonder whether special poisons truly differ so much from common poisons or whether, in the end, they all follow the same principle. Soon after, the familiar status window appears before his eyes, informing him that the ability to view statistics does not provide very detailed data when it is only at level 3. The dragon had already expected this answer, since he knew that his current limitations were still many. Thinking more carefully, he realizes that he did not see any plant capable of neutralizing the poison that had affected him. This realization makes him uneasy, causing him to question how he could resolve that situation on his own. As he rummages through his memories, trying to organize everything he had learned up to that point, he remembers that he could obtain some additional information by analyzing the lizard that had attacked him. It is then explained, through the system, that it is a poisonous Lacerda princess, rank D, a cunning monster, known for poisoning its prey and only feeding on the remains after the poison has fully taken effect. The dragon wonders, with a certain disbelief, whether that had really happened to him. The status continues by detailing that, after ingesting extremely toxic substances, this creature is capable of internally producing an even more powerful poison. Its bodily fluids can function as an antidote to the very poison it generates, and it usually uses this as a bargaining chip to preserve its life when it ends up captured by stronger enemies. With this information, the dragon understands that he needs to capture the caterpillar alive in order to obtain the antidote. As he gets up, he notices that he can move without great difficulty, thanks to his natural resistance to poison. Even so, when he begins to run, he realizes that the creature may be nearby, patiently waiting for the right moment to attack him again. Still, he decides to take the risk, as he sees no other option. Looking ahead, he spots the lizard. Using his rolling skill, the dragon quickly realizes that the creature is also capable of performing the same movement. Soon after, he tries to repeat the attack he had used against the spider earlier, believing that it would work once more. However, he ends up colliding with the same wooden log that the caterpillar usually uses as support, falling awkwardly to the ground. When he looks back, he realizes that it can attack while rolling, something he had not anticipated. After noticing this, the dragon begins to use his ability with greater caution, dodging the caterpillar's strikes while trying to guide it into a favorable position. Little by little, he manages to lead it to the riverbank and, with a calculated movement, causes the creature to fall into the water. However, he knows that if it is eliminated at that moment, he will lose his only chance to obtain the antidote. Thus, he decides to focus on the river to save it, using his fire strike in a controlled manner to bring it back to the surface. When he sees the creature right in front of him again, the dragon believes that he is already dead due to the poison accumulated in his body and ends up fainting. The scene shifts to Myria, who walks through the forest with careful steps and ends up hearing her friend's voice calling out. Marielle wonders where the girl is, looking around with concern, but soon hears Myria in the distance. Myria asks if she was looking for her, and the girl replies that yes, she was. Since she had not seen her for a long time, she became worried and went to her house, but did not find her there. Because of that, she asks what Myria was doing alone in the forest. She replies that she had been bedridden with a mild cold, but decided to go out for a walk when she began to feel better. Marielle only asks that she not walk alone through the woods, as it is dangerous, and explains that she received a notice from the guild, asking that Myria not worry so much about certain matters. The scene returns to the dragon, who begins to wonder where he is as he regains consciousness. He soon remembers that he had been poisoned and goes on alert. Looking ahead, he sees the same lizard calmly staring at him. He asks, in his thoughts, whether the caterpillar was waiting to kill him, but he realizes that he does not feel any pain at all. Confused, he wonders if it gave him an antidote, and the caterpillar replies that yes, it did. Then, the dragon picks it up in his arms, somewhat hesitantly, to thank it for having saved him. Despite the intense battle they had, he expresses the desire for them to become friends. The dragon comments that, after so much effort and suffering, he realized that perhaps they are kindred souls. When he looks at it more closely, he notices that the caterpillar is, in a way, actually quite cute. Upon arriving home, he offers food to it and feels happy to finally have company during meals. Observing more carefully, the dragon realizes that neither of them has a real name, only titles linked to their species: young plague dragon and poisonous creature. Even though they are merely classifications, he decides not to think about names and prefers that both continue like that. Even so, he does not mind calling it simply you. Over time, he realizes that it has grown quite attached to him. In this way, they end up becoming each other's first friends. He says that, if it wants, it can stay and live with him without restrictions. The dragon then explains to the caterpillar that that strange liquid is the special poison that he himself produced. Seeing it eating without any fear, he comments that it could be fatal for most creatures. Soon after, he remembers that it has high resistance, so there is no reason for concern, seeing how much it seems to like it. He decides to try a little himself and immediately realizes that it is extremely poisonous, causing his poison skill to rise from level 4 to level 5. The scene moves forward to the next day, when both of them fight together to grow stronger and defeat enemies more easily. After each battle, they grow even closer and begin to act in perfect sync to obtain food. They sleep together, and as he observes the caterpillar's face while it rests, the dragon realizes how easy it is to forget that it possesses a deadly poison. Even so, he asks it not to bite him while he sleeps, although that seems to be something almost instinctive for it. On the following day, the dragon decides to eat fruits and offers some to the caterpillar, but notices that it does not like them at all. Without hesitation, it jumps from his shoulder to look for something poisonous and ends up finding a cadaver mushroom, rank B, a fungus that exudes the smell of a corpse and possesses a powerful poison, something that practically no animal would dare to consume. Looking ahead, the dragon realizes that the caterpillar is almost drooling with the desire to eat it. However, he does not allow it, stating that if it eats it, it will end up with a horrible smell. The caterpillar becomes quite irritated by the refusal. The dragon even thinks that he will be attacked, but it ends up revealing the presence of a two-headed enemy. As he observes it, he realizes that the creature possesses high attributes and abilities with frightening names, many of them involving gravity. He does not know exactly how to defeat that monster. Abilities such as tenacious and marking seem to serve to track targets, making escape almost impossible. When he looks at the caterpillar, the dragon realizes that both of them are thinking the same way at that moment. It begins to roll to attack. While he tries to land a direct punch, but ends up being pushed back by the brute strength of the beast. When he least expects it, the dragon receives a devastating gravitational blow and is almost defeated, being saved by the caterpillar at the very last instant. As he uses his fire strike, he realizes that the monster possesses a terrifying regeneration ability, something that seems to come from another world. When the creature prepares to use gravity once again, the dragon runs in to attack, but ends up being bitten. Even so, he takes advantage of the opening to punch the enemy while the caterpillar applies its poison. The beast manages to heal itself once more, but its strength begins to visibly decline. The dragon recognizes the effect of the poison, as he has already experienced it before and knows how heavy and debilitating it can be. Happy, the dragon begins to celebrate internally. Believing that victory is finally within his reach, his heart races as he realizes that the enemy no longer shows the same strength as before. In the midst of these thoughts, he reflects that he would never wish to evolve into something like a two-headed dragon. To him, that form seemed unnatural, as if it were the result of an existence forced to keep living at any cost. When he checks the enemy's status, he understands the reason it is still standing: the sacrifice ability. The beast is capable of tearing off one of its own heads to prevent the poison from spreading through its body, surviving at the cost of an absurd amount of pain. Before he can fully react, the monster attacks with extreme speed, surprising even the dragon. By instinct, he throws himself to the side and manages to dodge by a hair's breadth, feeling the cutting wind pass close to his body. The two begin to exchange numerous blows in succession, each impact echoing through the forest. Even so, the dragon starts to gain the upper hand. Taking advantage of an opening, he lands a precise punch that sends the enemy flying into the air without giving the creature time to recover. He ends the fight with a powerful MMA strike, smashing the beast's body against the ground and putting a definitive end to the combat. However, the feeling of victory does not last long. The dragon becomes extremely apprehensive when he realizes that his friend does not respond in any way. The silence around him becomes suffocating. Overwhelmed by fear, he feels something he has never experienced before. Desperate, he makes a silent prayer, asking God not to grant him the ability to transform into a human or any other grand power. He begs only for her to be saved. Shortly after, his eyes widen when he notices several trails of blood scattered across the ground, which makes his heart sink even further. When he least expects it, she appears before him, gravely injured, with her body covered in deep marks. Before the dragon can react, the creature's other head suddenly appears, still alive. Consumed by rage and a protective instinct, he attacks without hesitation. Each blow is charged with pure fury, and the creature does not last long, being defeated in a brutal manner. As he takes his friend into his arms, the dragon realizes how badly hurt she is and feels a deep ache in his chest. At that exact moment, a new notification appears. He receives 234 skill points and unlocks the ability to transform into a human, a power that arrives along with emotions he still does not know how to deal with. The scene then shifts to the village, where the girls are talking calmly. One of them comments that she has just finished cleaning the entrance and the hallway, giving a final wipe to make sure everything was in order. She notes that they almost never receive visits from people outside the city and shows curiosity about what those people must be like. When she looks at the table, she notices the presence of a different book. The girl explains that she picked it up because she thought her friend would really like the content. As she opens the book, she comments that, to face the threats described there, one needs to become an adventurer and train a lot, perhaps for years, to have any real chance of survival. She emphasizes that monsters above rank B are extremely dangerous and that only heroes or saints are capable of facing them head-on. Then, the girl asks with curiosity about stone dragons. Her friend explains that these creatures are normally rank C, but that they can become even stronger if they evolve, which makes them even more dangerous. Because of that, she asks her to be careful and avoid going into the forest without necessity. Suddenly, noises are heard outside, indicating that the adventurers have finally arrived at the village, bringing with them stories, risks, and new possibilities. And thus ends another episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content. See you next week. Bye. The scene shifts to two girls walking along a dirt road halfway between the village and the forest. The atmosphere is calm, yet the tension of the mission is clearly perceptible in the air. One of them breaks the silence and questions her friend about the decision she made. She asks why she accepted a rank C mission with only an elf as her partner. Missions of that level are not simple, they require preparation, experience, and often a large group to handle unexpected situations. For someone still rising within the guild, it seemed like an unnecessary risk. She insists that it might have been wiser to wait for more members before venturing so deep into the forest. The other girl responds lightly, almost carefree. She says that if the two of them are together, everything will be easier. With a teasing smile, she adds that if the situation becomes truly bad, she can simply run away and leave her behind. Her friend immediately stops, irritated, and asks whether she would really abandon her to die. The girl laughs and says it was just a joke. Then she explains that, although it is classified as rank C, the mission does not involve defeating powerful monsters, but merely exploring the forest and gathering information. In theory, it should not be particularly dangerous. Then, in a more serious tone, she reminds her that they are searching for a person who may already be dead. The scene returns to moments earlier, when the two were still in the village, speaking with the one who requested the mission. The contractor shows surprise upon seeing an elf there, commenting that it is not common for an elf to live among humans in a small village like that. The young woman calmly replies that she is only half elf and introduces herself as Marielle. Her tone is firm, yet polite. Shortly afterward, Marielle asks that they not reveal the details of the mission to Miria. The person they are searching for is more dead than alive. He was part of Maria's group, and together they faced a stone dragon in a difficult battle. Since then, Miria has blamed herself for Daz's fate, believing she could have done something differently. Marielle suspects that, driven by guilt, Miria may have gone alone into the forest in search of him, something extremely dangerous. For that reason, she wants to discover the truth before a new tragedy occurs. The scene cuts to the dragon, who, after long efforts, managed to prepare effective medicines so that his caterpillar friend could fully recover. Satisfied with the result, he decides to leave the cave for a moment to check his attributes after leveling up. He knows he needs to move away, because if he were to perform his transformation into a human in front of the caterpillar, she might attack him by instinct. Moreover, he still does not feel inclined to return to the village and meet Miria again, fearing complications. Observing his reflection on the calm surface of a lake, he begins to imagine what his human form would look like. If he truly became human, what would he do? He does not wish to abandon the caterpillar. Yet he admits that living in a human village seems tempting. Perhaps he could alternate between the cave and the village every 3 days. The mere possibility of earning the human's trust excites him. With his heart racing in anticipation, he activates the transformation. The result, however, is far from what he had idealized. When he looks at his reflection again, he feels disappointed. He considers himself even uglier than before. He becomes irritated with the system, as the human form does not match the image he had imagined. To make matters worse, when checking his attributes, he realizes that his attack and defense have been reduced by half. The transformation brings social advantages, but weakens his combat power. Frustrated and irritated, he cancels the transformation and remains dejected for a few moments. The narrative returns to the two girls, now walking through the dense forest. The environment is too silent, which makes them even more alert. Ahead of them, they find the entrance to a cave. Near the entrance, there are impressive sculptures. One represents a dragon, and the other appears to be a human figure. The half-elf observes carefully and concludes that it could only have been made with powerful magic. The surrounding scenery is unsettling. Pieces of meat are scattered across the ground, suggesting that something large and predatory lives there. Even so, they decide to enter cautiously. To their surprise, the interior of the cave is illuminated and surprisingly organized. It does not resemble the chaotic lair of an ordinary beast. They even find a pot containing still fresh fruit, which indicates unusual habits. Suddenly, they come face to face with a caterpillar. The creature, frightened, quickly hides in the shadows. The tension rises. The girl concludes that they need to leave immediately. Outside, the dragon watches the two of them entering his home. He wonders whether they are human, since one appears only half human. He imagines that they must be impressed by the organization of the cave. He knows, however, that if he appears in his dragon form, he will be seen only as a monster. He decides to use the human transformation once again. When he appears before them, he tries to introduce himself in a peaceful manner. However, the girls are startled by his sudden appearance. Instinctively, they attack and flee from the cave as fast as they can. At a safe distance, they discuss whether they should return to the village and report what they saw. They are in shock upon discovering that dragons are living in that forest. The girl decides that it is better not to spread the information immediately. They will report to the guild so that a larger team can investigate safely. She asks whether they should leave the forest and call their usual group. Her friend agrees, stating that they will make contact as soon as possible. The next day, the dragon wakes up discouraged, considering the incident a complete disaster. Upon returning to the cave, he asks the caterpillar for a favor. There is a troop of monkeys that keeps stealing his dried meat, and he has decided to teach them a lesson. The caterpillar prepares a potent poison for him to mix into the meat as a trap. They wait until one of the monkeys falls for the bait. When they realize the poisoning, the monkeys become enraged and call for reinforcements. Then the leader of the troop appears, enormous and imposing. The dragon immediately recognizes that it is a monster of higher classification. Upon checking its status, he discovers that it is rank D+, an evolved form of orangutan that defeated the former alpha to assume leadership. Among them, evolving through battles is considered something sacred. In addition, the leader commands support magic that strengthens the entire clan. The dragon unleashes a powerful fireball, but the monkeys create a defensive barrier that blocks the attack. Immediately afterward, they advance as a group. With the caterpillar's support, he defeats some enemies, but the leader manages to grab the caterpillar and hurl her against a tree. Fortunately, the dragon catches her before the impact. In that moment, he understands that if the battle continues in that manner, both of them will die. Remembering a newly acquired telepathy skill, he attempts to negotiate. He asks the leader to calm his subordinates and offers the antidote prepared by the caterpillar in exchange for a truce. The orangutan responds coldly that such a proposal is out of the question. They represent too great a threat to be ignored. It is better to eliminate them now, even if it costs a few casualties. The dragon argues that if they keep fighting, no one will leave alive. In his view, the monkeys only know how to resolve conflicts through death. Even so, the leader pretends to accept the proposal, while the caterpillar applies the antidote to the poisoned monkey. Everything proves to be a trap. Taking advantage of the distraction, they kidnap the caterpillar. The leader's true objective is to force a direct duel, a one-on-one confrontation. The clash begins brutally. The orangutan throws the dragon far away and maintains an incessant offensive. The dragon retreats, seeking space and analyzing his opponent's rhythm. When the leader advances again, he activates his charge ability, leaps with precision, and delivers a strike that drives the monster's foot into the ground. Seizing the opening, he executes an impressive sequence of attacks, drastically reducing the enemy's vitality. When he attempts to deliver the final blow, he is caught off guard by a violent counterattack and thrown backward. Before his eyes, the leader of the monkeys evolves once more, strengthening himself with the power gained in battle. The confrontation, which was already dangerous, has just reached an even more threatening level. Amid an intense and brutal exchange of blows, the dragon begins to lose the advantage he had gained. His movements are no longer as precise as before, and fatigue weighs heavily on every muscle. In a moment of carelessness, the leader of the monkeys seizes the opening and lands a direct punch to his stomach. The impact is devastating, forcing the air out of his lungs as pain spreads throughout his body. Even so, despite feeling that his strength is at its limit, he advances once more, determined not to retreat. The orangutan, equally wounded, also refuses to yield. The two begin exchanging punches in succession, each impact echoing through the forest like the sound of wood splitting apart. The ground beneath their feet cracks, the surrounding trees tremble, and the other monkeys watch in tense silence. There is no longer any refined strategy, only brute force, endurance, and determination. The fight reaches a critical point. Both are exhausted, barely able to remain standing. Their breathing is heavy, their bodies covered in marks from the battle. it becomes evident that whoever lands the next decisive blow will emerge victorious. There will be no second chance. Gathering the last of his strength, the dragon concentrates everything he has left into a single movement. With a hoarse roar, he advances and delivers one final, precise punch, striking the leader of the monkeys squarely. The impact is enough to bring him down. The enormous body of the orangutan crashes to the ground with force, raising dust and dry leaves. For a brief instant, the dragon believes he has won. At that moment, a system notification appears before him. His dragon strike ability has evolved from level 2 to level 3. The information flashes before his eyes, confirming the growth achieved through battle. However, before he can even process the achievement, the leader of the monkeys, driven by pure instinct and willpower, rises in one last desperate effort. With what remains of his energy, the orangutan lands a direct blow to the dragon's face. The impact makes his vision spin, the world around him distort. His balance is completely lost. Without strength to continue, both of them collapse almost at the same time, defeated by their own limits. Even unconscious, the system continues to function. A new notification appears, confirming that he has gained enough experience points to rise from level 37 to level 39. Despite his critical condition and absolute exhaustion, the battle has brought significant rewards. The confrontation has not only strengthened his body, but also elevated his abilities to a new level. The forest slowly returns to silence, marked by the scars of combat. And thus another episode comes to an end. If you enjoyed the story and wish to follow the upcoming events, when he opens his eyes again, he immediately realizes that he is back in the cave, with the poison princess by his side. Even though he is still confused, his information panel helps him remember that he had been fighting the giant orangutan, and that the battle ended in direct combat, using only his fists. Upon checking his statistics, he notices that his level has increased, which can only mean that he won. Serta lets out an excited little squeal and makes small jumps, celebrating. He assumes that she was the one who brought him back and takes the opportunity to ask how she managed to do that. However, her expression immediately shifts to irritation. Pointing at the monkeys around them, she makes it clear that they were the ones who carried him there. At first, he thinks they came seeking revenge for their former leader, but upon closer observation, he realizes they are looking at him with admiration. Checking his information again, he confirms that he has received the title of clan chief. That means he is now the leader of that group of monkeys. The poison princess shows no excitement about this. He tries to calm her down, explaining that the monkeys do not seem hostile and probably want to become his followers. Deep down, he considers it fortunate, since they will be able to help him with heavy tasks. She accepts the situation reluctantly, but remains clearly dissatisfied. Later, the monkeys gather a huge pile of fruits for him. The gesture impresses him, as it shows that they have begun cooperating immediately. The princess, on the other hand, is not pleased at all to see how easily he praises the new helpers. After some time, the protagonist decides to share with them the dried meat he had prepared, since with so many fruits available, it will not be necessary to hunt that day. Then he resolves to replenish his stock of meat. One of the monkeys watches the entire process attentively, curious and visibly interested in learning. Noticing this, he decides to teach. He shows how to slice the meat into strips, place them in a pot, add salt and spices, and mix everything carefully, rubbing the seasoning in thoroughly. Then he explains that it needs to rest for a while before drying. The monkey pays attention to every detail and soon tries to repeat the procedure, excited by the idea of having more dried meat available in the future. Everything seemed peaceful until the protagonist senses tension in the air. When he looks at the poison princess, he realizes she is furious. He does not understand the reason, since he believes he has done nothing wrong. Even so, he ignores her reaction and decides to leave the monkeys in charge of the dried meat from then on. Then he realizes that if he no longer needs to hunt, he will have too much free time. Now that he lives with several cave companions, it will be necessary to store even more food. That means producing more pots. On that same day, he goes out to collect clay and shape new containers. Once again, one of the monkeys follows him. Curious, he remembers that he possesses a skill called long and nimble fingers, but he admits to himself that the monkeys are probably even better at manual work. So he demonstrates the shaping process and then points out where there is more clay so the monkey can try alone. The little one immediately begins molding, and the protagonist feels satisfied to have someone taking care of the pottery. When he is about to leave the cave, he notices the poison princess staring at a piece of clay. Finding it strange, he asks what she intends to do, casually commenting that with those small hands and feet, she might not be able to shape much. Upon hearing that, she becomes completely still for a moment and then runs out crying. He does not understand what he said wrong and assumes she simply became interested in the activity. Soon after, he hands tools made of hardened clay to 2 other monkeys, explaining that they will be responsible for expanding the cave. Since they have already demonstrated skill, he believes they will do a good job. He feels satisfied with the progress, but the poison princess remains unhappy, and he still does not realize the reason. In another scene, we see Mel Yuno in the city, having a meal while waiting for the rest of the group. Tia comments that Das and Ramana must have already received the message and will arrive as soon as they finish their current mission. Even so, Tia seems uneasy when she recalls that they encountered a real plague dragon. She admits that the situation was frightening and that the cave seems suspicious from the beginning. For her, there is something strange in that forest that needs to be investigated more carefully. The next day, the poison princess wakes the protagonist in a hurry. He wakes up confused, imagining that there is an enemy nearby. However, he soon realizes that his body feels heavy. Looking around, he notices that several monkeys are sleeping while clinging to his arms and legs. That explains why he cannot move. He tries to wake them, asking for space, but no one reacts. Tired, he decides to simply go back to sleep, which makes the princess even more irritated. A few minutes later, strange noises make him wake up again. The monkeys are collapsed, completely unconscious. Upon checking their statistics, he discovers that they were poisoned by a special high-level toxin. Confused, he looks at the poison princess, who begins to laugh. He immediately understands that it was her doing. Even in the face of his furious reaction, she merely makes a confident gesture, as if she were proud of what she did. He scolds her, stating that what she did was not right, and demands that she administer the antidote immediately. With no alternative, the princess ends up saving the monkeys, although she remains visibly irritated afterward. Our protagonist admits that he had been annoyed with the orangutans, but he tells the poison princess that poisoning them like that was excessive. For him, it crossed the line. Serta, however, does not agree. She points out several flaws in his attitude, making it clear that she is still hurt. When he realizes that he has not been giving her the proper attention, he tries to fix the situation in an unexpected way. He invites her out, saying that they can spend more time together from now on. The poison princess seems to like the idea. He believes that if they stay side by side throughout the entire day, things will return to normal. Meanwhile, Mary is standing near the borders of the village, reflecting. Several days have already passed since those adventurers entered the forest, and no news has arrived. The silence only increases her concern. Finally, Miria decides that she can no longer wait. She apologizes to Mariel and heads alone toward the forest to search for the 2 of them. At the same time, our protagonist also sets out to explore the forest alongside the poison princess. He feels that he is very close to evolving again, so he wants to gain more experience and gather resources to improve the cave. He also intends to collect fruits and vegetables to prepare varied meals. Serta accompanies him, but he soon notices that she does not seem excited. Trying to improve the mood, he comments that everyone is having fun. The monkeys continue playing around, waving the weapons that he himself crafted for them. They are noisy and a little over the top, but he notices that the weapons have indeed greatly increased the group's attack power. He can hardly wait to test this in real combat. He asks Serta to warn him if she spots any prey, but she does not respond and simply walks on in silence. He becomes confused, unable to understand what he did wrong this time. The problem is that they do not speak the same language, so he cannot fully grasp what is bothering her. Suddenly, she makes an alert sound. There are monsters hidden behind the bushes. He confirms it when he finds 2 strange wolves. The monkeys move first, determined and coordinated. They charge at the beasts with swift and precise movements. The confrontation does not last long. Working together, the monkeys win without much difficulty. The dragon watches, analyzing every movement, and realizes that his allies are becoming increasingly efficient in battle. Satisfied, he decides there is no need to remain there. He chooses to move on alongside the lizard, advancing deeper into the forest. The scene then shifts to Mariel. She walks among the trees, tired and disoriented. The scenery looks the same in every direction, making it difficult to maintain any sense of direction. She is lost. As she tries to orient herself, she spots Daz standing several meters ahead. Her heart races. Relieved, she calls out his name, hoping he will turn around, but the boy does not respond. He continues walking with slow steps, as if he heard nothing. The strange behavior turns Mariel's relief into unease. Before she can reach him, howls echo through the forest. The sound comes from multiple directions, and by the time she realizes it, it is too late. Wolves emerge between the trees. Closing in, Mariel spins around, trying to find an escape route, but she is surrounded. The scene returns to the dragon and the lizard, who continue walking attentively through the forest, unaware of what is happening not far from there and of the danger drawing near. The lizard spends the entire day acting differently. Its movements are shorter, its gaze distant, and it avoids getting too close. It feels bothered because the dragon spends almost all his time with the monkeys, giving orders and overseeing the group's activities, and barely pays attention to it. That leaves it upset, even if it tries to hide it by maintaining a firm posture. The dragon, busy with his new responsibilities, takes time to notice. When he realizes the distance between them, he decides to approach and sincerely apologize. He explains that he is now the leader of the group and must think about everyone's safety, organize strategies, and ensure that no one gets hurt. Because of that, he ends up busy almost all the time. Even so, he makes it clear that the lizard is still important. He promises that starting the next day, he will set aside time just for the two of them, a moment without obligations, when they can hunt together, explore new paths, and have fun like before. Upon hearing this, the lizard immediately brightens up. Its expression changes and the tension disappears. It moves closer naturally, just as it used to. However, in the middle of their fun, a different sound echoes through the trees. It is not something common. Both of them stop at the same instant. The playfulness ends. They exchange an alert look and assume a defensive stance, focused on whatever might be approaching. Then he hears a familiar voice cutting through the air. Milia, something happened. Without thinking twice, he runs toward the sound. As he advances, his mind already considers the worst possible scenario. What if there are other humans nearby? What if it is a trap? When he finally arrives, he finds tension spread throughout the area. Someone insists they are not an enemy. He warns that it is dangerous. Too late, he asks if she is all right. He quickly checks her HP. It is still high. Relief. Even so, he admits to himself, if Milia is in real danger, he will act, no matter the cost or who he has to face. At that moment, notifications appear before him. Little Hero rises from level 2 to 3. Path of Evil goes from 3 to 4. He internally mocks the voice of God and asks, almost like a silent plea, for Milia to remain safe. Without hesitation, he charges toward one of the wolves and strikes it with such force that the creature is thrown far away. Before he can breathe a sigh of relief, he notices that the others have already surrounded him on all sides. When he tries to check his statistics to better understand the situation, he realizes that the numbers are scrambled, as if some energy were affecting everything around him. With no time to think too much, he decides to settle it through sheer strength. He advances against the monsters with his body wrapped in intense flame. One of the wolves falls almost immediately, but the others attack together. Even so, he blocks the blows using only one hand, demonstrating impressive resilience. Within moments, they are all defeated, proving that the ambush was not enough to stop him. After the battle, he receives a large amount of experience. However, when he turns around, he realizes that the girl is frightened. Trying to show that he is not a threat, he repeats a gesture he had made before. Gradually, she remembers this is the same dragon who saved her previously. The atmosphere changes, and the two are happy to see each other again. Even so, there is no time for conversation, as several monsters are still approaching. Determined, the girl climbs onto his back and, together, they charge toward the enemies. And so another episode comes to an end. Suddenly, a man arrives at the village in distress, out of breath and visibly desperate. He announces that he was unable to find Myria anywhere, despite having searched several nearby trails. Marielle immediately pales upon hearing this. Fear strikes her forcefully, bringing to mind countless frightening possibilities. She insists that he make another round through the forest, asking him to check every path, every clearing before returning again. Her voice trembles, but her determination is evident. The scene then cuts to a group of adventurers gathered before the so-called Forest of Noé. They observe the place with curiosity and a certain expectation. One of them comments that the forest does not seem as dangerous as the rumors suggest. However, one of the girls, more cautious, intervenes and explains that investigating alone would be imprudent. That is precisely why they called for reinforcements. She asks everyone to advance together, maintaining formation and heightened attention to examine the area up close. Meanwhile, the dragon runs between the dense trees, his agile movements contrasting with the weight of his body. Beasts pursue him relentlessly, emerging between trunks and bushes like determined shadows. Even at high speed, he realizes that the creatures are abnormally persistent. They show neither fear nor hesitation. Upon spotting a region surrounded by mountains, he decides to stop before being completely cornered. He places Myria in a protected spot, behind rocks that offer cover, and resolves to face the monsters right there. When the first attack comes, he reacts without delay, releasing his breath of fire. The flames spread across the field, illuminating the scene intensely. The heat is enough to dispel any doubt. Within moments, the last enemy falls without great effort. Even so, something deeply troubles him. The creatures did not retreat at any moment. They advanced as if they did not fear death, as if they were being forced. Then, the status voice echoes in his mind, informing him that his skill has reached the maximum level and can no longer evolve in its current state. He resumes running with Myria, but his thoughts grow heavier. He begins to question whether he should take her back to the village in that monstrous form. He recalls past events, looks filled with fear and hostility, and fears that everything will repeat itself. Deep down, he would simply like to ask why she was alone in the forest, far from any protection. He decides to leave her near the village and depart before anyone sees them together. However, before that, Myria calls out to him and thanks him for saving her life. The sincerity in her words surprises him. At that very moment, a new evolution window appears before his eyes. The first option presented is a low-ranking Drago human, classified as a demi-human, with a body partially covered in dark scales. He wonders whether that would make him appear merely as a strange creature in the eyes of humans, neither fully dragon nor truly man. The second option is the rolling dragon, specialized in extreme speed. The description immediately awakens his interest. He could become even faster, almost untouchable. However, he fears ending up looking like nothing more than an exotic curiosity, something observed from a distance. The third option is a small light-type dragon, endowed with high intelligence and capable of using white magic. He recognizes that it would be rare for a dragon of his lineage to achieve something like that. Even so, the idea pleases him, especially because of the possible affinity with humans. The fourth option is Jormungand, a colossal serpent whose scales carry deadly poison, rendering the soil barren wherever it passes. Even before the description is completely finished, he rejects this possibility. He does not wish to become something that brings absolute devastation and irreversible destruction. At that moment, Myria asks him to stop for a while so she can drink water and wash her face. While she rests by a small stream, he continues reflecting. The rolling dragon tempts him with speed. The small light dragon tempts him with closeness to humans. The Drago human seems to be the most balanced option, a bridge between two worlds. Suddenly, Myria appears right in front of him, startling him. He tries to explain that he is choosing a form closer to a human one, but she does not understand his words. After some time attempting to communicate, he begins to understand her better. His language proficiency skill evolves from level 2 to level 3, making the sentences clearer. She introduces herself again as Myria and invites him to play. He accepts, and for a few minutes the two of them have fun as if there were no danger at all around them. The tension temporarily disappears. Afterward, she asks if he has seen her friend. The dragon imagines that she is referring to the people from the cave, but he soon realizes that is not the case. Myria clarifies that she is looking for Daz, not the adventurers. Upon hearing the name, he remembers clearly. Daz was the man who died in the previous confrontation. She takes a deep breath in front of him and asks, unexpectedly, if he knows Doujinshi-san. Silence settles in. Then, little by little, she realizes it on her own. It is him, the dragon who saved her before. The atmosphere changes completely. She asks his name. He does not have one. Whenever he checked his status, the name field remained empty. He had never given importance to that, until now. Myria says her own name again and asks if she can choose one for him. He accepts. After a few seconds of concentration, she announces Urushi. She explains that it is the name of her favorite flower, a flower she hopes to see bloom once again. The status voice echoes. Name confirmation, Urusha. Once chosen, it cannot be changed. He hesitates for a moment and asks if there is another option. The answer is immediate. No, she was the one who chose it. That is enough. He accepts. Now he is Urusha. The name seems to settle into his very existence, as if it had always been there, merely waiting to be called. Myria smiles emotionally, repeating the name softly, as if she were protecting something precious. But the moment is interrupted by footsteps in the distance. Urushia asks her to climb onto his back, and the two of them quickly depart between the trees. He decides to leave her near the village, and after that, search for Daz alone, determined to resolve this matter to the very end. However, it does not take long for him to notice something unsettling. The same wolves from before reappear among the trees, emerging from the shadows with empty eyes and stiff movements. At first glance, they seem like just another common threat. But it takes only a few seconds of observation to realize that there is something deeply wrong. They do not advance in a disorderly way. They move in synchrony, surrounding, blocking escape routes, retreating and attacking as if they shared a single mind. That was not natural behavior. They are being controlled. Urushia defeats one of them with a precise strike, but immediately realizes that there are many others around. The number seems to increase with every passing instant. Then, among the silhouettes approaching, he sees a familiar figure. His body stiffens. It is Das. He tries to check his status, concentrating to activate his analysis ability. However, no information appears. The field remains empty, as if that man simply did not exist within the world's records. Myria calls out to Daz, her voice filled with hope and desperation. She asks him to listen, to respond, to come back to himself, but he does not react. He continues advancing mechanically, his steps heavy and without hesitation, like a puppet guided by invisible strings. Without thinking twice, the dragon places himself in front of her, spreading his wings to protect her. When Daz gets too close, Urushia and Myria attack together. The flames explode in a single intense stream, illuminating the forest and driving the surrounding wolves back. It is then that they notice he is holding something tightly against his chest, as if it were a precious treasure that could not be lost under any circumstances. His fingers are rigid, almost digging into the surface of the object. Before they can fully understand the situation, distant sounds echo through the forest. Observing more carefully what Daz was carrying, the truth reveals itself. It is a dragon egg. Silence weighs heavily for a moment. Urushia understands the plan almost immediately. Daz intended to use the egg to lure an earth dragon to the village to provoke its fury, guide it by instinct, make it believe that its offspring was threatened, and then, in the resulting chaos, destruction would be inevitable. The danger had not ended. In truth, it was only just beginning. Urushia and Myria understand without needing many words. The egg must be returned to the nest as quickly as possible. If the earth dragon was already being drawn by the absence of its offspring, every second lost could mean the annihilation of the village. They try to deduce where Daz had intended to go. Urushia begins to question whether all of this is part of something bigger. Perhaps revenge, perhaps manipulation, perhaps someone hidden in the shadows is using Daz as a piece in a broader game. His thoughts become tangled. The pieces do not fit together. Something is missing. Suddenly, Myria makes a bold decision. She asks Urushia to leave her right there. She says she will be able to handle the remaining monsters and that he must stop Daz, or rather, whatever is controlling his body. Her voice trembles slightly, but her eyes are firm. Urushiya reacts immediately, indignant. He questions whether she has lost her mind. He would never abandon her in the midst of that danger, surrounded by creatures that clearly do not act of their own will. Even so, time is short. The situation demands speed. He positions her at a strategic point, near rocks that limit the angles of attack, and advances against the wolf. With a powerful blow, he strikes one of the creatures and sends it flying, its body spinning through the air before crashing heavily to the ground. Meanwhile, Myria ends up surrounded. Wolves approach from all sides, forming a tight circle. However, with surprising agility, she dodges the attacks, uses the terrain to her advantage, and defeats the monsters around her one by one. Even under pressure, she keeps determination in her eyes, refusing to give in to fear. When more enemies begin to emerge between the trees, she raises her voice and shouts for Urushiya to protect the village. That is more important. If the earth dragon reaches it, nothing will remain. He hesitates for a brief moment, but he accepts. At that very moment, in the village, the inhabitants begin to hear a deep roar echoing through the mountains. The sound is low, ancient, filled with power. The ground vibrates beneath their feet, and the air seems to tremble, as if the earth itself were responding to the call. The scene returns to Urushiya, who is already flying as fast as he can, cutting through the sky toward the village. The wind rushes violently past his wings, but he does not slow down. He knows he must hurry. If the earth dragon is truly approaching, there may still be time to intercept it before the tragedy becomes reality. The fate of the village now depends on him. And thus ends another episode of this journey filled with dangers, difficult choices, and unexpected revelations. As he looks back and notices the girl on his back, the dragon quickly assesses her condition. Despite the fall, the frantic escape, and the danger they faced, her injuries do not seem as serious as he had first imagined. That detail brings him a certain sense of relief. Myria, in turn, also notices his condition when she sees the clear signs of exhaustion and the wounds on his back. She uses her magic to heal the injuries. A gentle light surrounds his scales as the pain begins to fade. The kind gesture leaves the dragon a little embarrassed, something unusual for such a powerful creature. Soon after, without wasting time, Myria urges him to hurry. She explains that the monster could reach the village at any moment and that every second may make a difference. The scene then shifts to the villagers. Some of them watch with concern as several strange creatures begin appearing around the area. Confusion spreads quickly, and many start wondering where those monsters are coming from. Gregory soon realizes that something is wrong. The protection created by Marielle, which was supposed to keep the village safe, is not working as it should. The barrier still exists, but it clearly has flaws. Even so, Gregory wastes no time. He confronts one of the approaching creatures and manages to defeat it with relative ease, demonstrating his experience in combat. Suddenly, however, a massive dragon appears in front of him. Gregory immediately grows concerned, for someone used to protecting the village. Seeing a dragon appear out of nowhere is enough to make him imagine the worst. However, before he can take any reckless action, Myria urgently calls out and asks him to calm down. She explains that the dragon did not come to attack the village. On the contrary, he is there precisely to help them. Gregory is completely surprised when he sees Myria riding on top of a dragon. For a few seconds, he simply cannot react. After a brief moment of confusion, the two end up recognizing each other. Gregory remembers that he had met Myria earlier in the village. Myria tries to reassure him. She explains that it may be difficult to believe, but this is the same dragon he saw before. He has simply grown and become much stronger. She asks Gregory to trust him, saying that despite his fierce appearance, he is an extremely gentle monster when it comes to humans. Even so, Gregory still takes some time to fully accept the idea that a dragon could help people. In the end, he decides to trust what Myria says and apologizes to the dragon for mistaking him for an enemy. The dragon feels happy when he realizes he has made a new friend. Gregory also notices something curious. The creature understands everything they are saying perfectly, reacting to their words as if following every detail of the conversation. Myria then asks Gregory if he has seen Daz. Gregory replies that he has. He explains that Dawes released a beast against him during the confrontation, and then fled shortly afterward. Myria urgently explains the situation. Dawes intends to lure a monster to the village using an egg that he stole. Determined to stop that from happening, she says she will go after him immediately. However, before they leave, Gregory asks her to wait for a moment. He explains that the villagers might panic if they suddenly see someone arriving on a dragon. It would be better to warn everyone first. The dragon then lowers himself and asks Gregory to climb onto his back as well. The scene shifts again to the villagers. Some of them are watching Dawes from a distance, trying to understand what is happening. They notice that he is carrying a strange egg in his hands, something that clearly looks dangerous. Suddenly, Myria and Gregory appear flying above the village on the dragon, drawing everyone's attention. They quickly ask if anyone has seen where Dawes went. Gregory soon explains that he headed toward the watchtower. At that exact moment, everyone begins to hear a distant sound. A heavy roar echoes through the mountains. A monster is approaching the village. Gregory makes a quick decision. He asks Myria to leave that part to him. He promises that he will distract the enemy dragon while she focuses on evacuating the villagers as quickly as possible. Myria asks if he is sure. Gregory replies that he is. He reminds her that she is still injured and that entering a battle now would only worsen her wounds. The dragon also agrees with Gregory. He promises to stay by the man's side during the battle and asks Myria to focus on evacuating the village. With few options left, she accepts the plan and asks both of them to be very careful. Gregory looks at the dragon beside him and still finds it hard to believe what he is seeing. That small hatchling he encountered before has now transformed into a massive plague dragon. He has heard stories about monsters that grow quickly and become extremely powerful creatures. When everything is over, he intends to introduce the dragon to the entire village. He wants everyone to understand that the creature is not an enemy. The scene then shifts to Dawes. He has already killed several people along the way, even the animals that belong to the villagers. The trail of destruction leaves the residents shocked. Many cannot understand why he is acting that way. Suddenly, Gregory appears riding on the dragon, causing even more astonishment among the villagers. Some immediately shout for him to retreat, warning that Dawes is trying to lure a dragon to the village. Gregory quickly responds, telling everyone to leave the area as fast as possible. Without wasting time, the villagers begin to flee in different directions. Dawes then takes advantage of the moment of distraction and launches a surprise attack on Gregory. The blow knocks him off the dragon's back. Right after that, Dawes tries to attack the creature itself. However, the dragon reacts quickly and manages to block the strike before it can cause serious damage. With great strength, the dragon grabs Dawes and is about to deliver the final blow. But something makes him hesitate. When he realizes that Dawes appears to be controlled by some strange force, the dragon decides not to kill him. Instead, he uses a special power to make him fall into a deep sleep. He believes that taking a human life could turn him into a cruel dragon, something he wants to avoid at all costs. He prefers to avoid taking human lives whenever possible. Gregory watches this and is sincerely impressed. The dragon's actions confirm something important to him. That creature truly is an ally of humans. After that, the dragon realizes there is still a bigger problem. He needs to recover the egg before it is too late. However, at the very moment he prepares to act, Dawes suddenly awakens. As the dragon carefully analyzes Dawes' status, he notices something unsettling. The values are very similar to those of the Mahawolfs he had fought before. That does not seem natural for an ordinary human. The feeling that something is wrong grows even stronger. At that moment, a boy comes running and calls out to Dawes, apparently unaware of the danger of the situation. Without hesitation, Dawes grabs him and pulls him close, immediately turning him into a hostage. The frightened boy begs him to stop, asking for help with a trembling voice. Seeing the scene, the dragon realizes that the situation is becoming critical. If he does not act soon, the real stone dragon will reach the village, and in that case disaster will be inevitable. Dawes slowly backs away while keeping the boy under threat, using the child as a shield. The dragon understands that any wrong move could end up killing the boy. For a few seconds, everything falls silent. Suddenly, he decides to act. The dragon leaps forward and fires a slime attack from his mouth, trying to neutralize Dawes without hitting the boy. At the very moment he does this, he senses something even more troubling approaching. The real dragon is getting closer and closer. Dawes reacts quickly. He drops the boy onto the ground and runs toward the stolen egg. Before anyone can stop him, he destroys it with a single blow. When the egg breaks, the effect is immediate. The stone dragon, which was already furious, becomes even more aggressive. As he watches the chaos approaching, the dragon begins to blame himself. He asks himself whether he made a mistake by not eliminating Dawes earlier. Perhaps everything could have been avoided. Even so, he feels some relief knowing that the boy who had been taken hostage managed to escape alive. At that moment, Gregory appears beside him again and asks if he is all right. The dragon answers quickly. He asks Gregory to take the child to a safe place and warns that he will stay there to face the monster alone. Gregory understands the seriousness of the situation. Without arguing, he grabs the boy and runs toward the village to bring him to safety. The dragon realizes that many people are depending on him and decides to face the stone dragon. Even knowing that the enemy is far more powerful, his goal is not to win, but to buy time so the villagers can escape. He begins the attack with flames and several charges, but the opponent's rocky scales withstand the blows without suffering real damage. In response, the stone dragon counterattacks with devastating force and slams him to the ground. When everything seems lost, the villagers appear to help him, armed only with bows and improvised spears. Together, they manage to coordinate an attack that hits the monster's eye. But when the dragon checks the enemy's status, he realizes that it still has a lot of life left. Soon after, the stone dragon reacts violently, killing one villager and leaving several others injured. Unable to find a strategy to win and seeing the system indicate that the only option is to flee, the dragon almost loses hope. At that critical moment, however, a divine voice announces that he is leveled up, going from level 3 to level 4. A strange sensation runs through the dragon's body, and he realizes that he has begun a process of evolution. 4 evolutionary paths appear before him, each representing a different type of growth. However, there is no time to analyze everything calmly, because the enemy is still standing right in front of him. Laplace begins to calculate the probabilities. The more aggressive evolutions, focused on immediate power, offer extremely low chances of survival, around 4% or even only 1%. Seeking brute strength at that moment could be practically suicidal. In contrast, Laplace identifies a more stable evolutionary route, focused on survival instead of bursts of power. If he chooses this path, the chances of getting out of the situation alive rise to more than 90%. Even so, the decision is difficult. The dragon of Ivali continues standing ahead, threatening, while the protagonist still does not fully understand the future consequences of each evolution. At the same time, his mana is rapidly drained during the transformation, as if his body were being rebuilt from the inside. With time running out, he needs to decide: continue fighting with his current power or accept the evolution that offers the greatest chance of surviving and escaping that nearly impossible situation. The scene changes to some adventurers who end up hearing, from a distance, the intense noise of the battle. The sound of the blows echoes through the region, making it clear that something very powerful is fighting in that place. Upon realizing this, everyone understands that they need to leave immediately to discover which creature is responsible for that threat that is putting the village in danger. Soon after, the scene returns to the villagers. Some girls ask if all the people have already managed to retreat to a safe place. The answer is that almost everyone has already left, but there are still some who remain in the danger area. At that moment, 3 people appear running in front of the group, but Gregory and some others are still missing. When they ask where he is, someone replies that Gregory stayed behind, fighting against the stone dragon. Upon hearing this, one of the girls asks Myria to stay at the place and not go there. However, Myria refuses. She explains that she has already helped all the people who were in that place and that she cannot simply abandon those who are still in danger. Determined, she decides to head toward the battle. Realizing that there is no way to convince her to stay, the girl ends up allowing her to go. The scene changes again and returns to the dragon. he begins to think about what he should do at that critical moment. There are two options before him: try to save Gregory or evolve immediately into a small arcane dragon and use recovery magic. The status system begins speaking to him, informing the probabilities. If he evolves into a small arcane dragon, the chance of defeating the enemy is only 4%. The chance of saving the humans is lower than 1%. Annoyed by those cold predictions, the dragon tells the system to shut up. Right after that, he advances and lands a strong blow on the monster, knocking it down to the ground for a moment. When he looks at Gregory, he realizes that his friend is gravely wounded and losing a lot of blood. With little time to think, he decides that he needs to evolve as quickly as possible. However, he also knows that Gregory might not be able to endure waiting. Even so, Gregory asks the dragon not to worry about him. Then he asks an unexpected question: why would a plague dragon like him help humans? The dragon himself admits that he does not know the answer. He simply feels that he needs to do that. Gregory then makes a strange request. He asks the dragon to devour him. According to him, dragons become stronger when they eat humans. However, the dragon refuses immediately. He states that he would never do something like that just to gain power. Besides that, he explains that his strength does not increase that way. The only way to become stronger is by evolving. At that moment, an explanation about his current race appears. The young plague dragon represents the first stage of an evil dragon, a creature destined to spread disasters across the world. Even so, the system reveals something curious. Despite that nature, he has not completely strayed from the correct path yet, and there is still the possibility of following another direction. Soon after, he receives a new title, Little Hero Level 1, a light attribute title. The dragon becomes completely surprised. For him, it seems impossible that a plague dragon could obtain something so connected to justice. Almost at the same time, he also receives another title, Wrongdoer. Confused, he begins to wonder why there is no specific evolution for a plague dragon, even though that is exactly what he is. While thinking about this, the human remembers when Myria took the dragon to the village for the first time. On that day, he was attacked with a spear. Even so, the dragon kept fighting the stone dragon to protect everyone. Deep down, he only wanted the humans to recognize him as a hero, because he knew he was not the monster everyone imagined. Then Gregory makes his final request. He asks the dragon to eliminate him before the monster does. Even without wanting to do that, the dragon ends up fulfilling the request. One of the men witnesses the scene from a distance and falls into despair. At that moment, several of the dragon's titles increase in level. The title Wrongdoer rises from level 4 to 5. The title Calamity goes from level 1 to 3. Meanwhile, the title Coward King rises from level 1 to level 2. The dragon realizes that this growth represents a great advancement in his power, but he also understands that now there may no longer be a path back. He then decides to analyze his third evolution possibility. The option that appears is Plague Dragon Rank B. This creature is described as an evil dragon that brings disaster wherever it goes. It is said that he has already destroyed countless human villages and that he bathes in a sea of blood, resting on top of mountains formed by corpses. He is considered one of the 3 great monsters of calamity. Even in the face of that dark description, the dragon makes his decision. He evolves into that powerful form, but makes a vow: protect that village at any cost and avenge the friend he has just lost. As soon as the evolution ends, he returns to the battle and faces the stone dragon again. The fight becomes terrifying. The two exchange violent blows, fighting almost on equal terms. At a certain moment, the dragon tries to lift the enemy and carry him into the air, but the monster is too heavy, so he decides to fly toward a more distant area, trying to move the battle away from the village. He attacks in several different ways, but many blows seem to have no effect. When he is about to receive a direct attack, he manages to dodge at the last moment. Right after that, he uses a powerful light strike against the enemy, but the damage caused is minimal. Shortly after, he almost receives another devastating blow and needs to fly again to escape. While analyzing the situation, he notices something worrying. He still has 200 health points, while the monster has lost only 62. The creature's resistance is extremely high. Even so, he keeps fighting. The dragon flies again and takes the beast even farther away from the village. This time, he uses explosive attacks and finally manages to cause real damage. Taking advantage of the opportunity, he advances and delivers a special punch against the monster. When he notices that the creature is trying to escape, he immediately positions himself in front of it, blocking any chance of fleeing. At that moment, the scene returns to the people who remain in the village, anxiously waiting for the result of that battle that could decide the fate of everyone. Suddenly, Ursha appears in front of the group, catching everyone by surprise. The shock spreads through the crowd, and the first question immediately arises: where is the ice dragon? Right after that, everyone turns toward Horus. They want to know if he is all right and what happened during the confrontation. Confusion takes over the place, with several people talking at the same time. Even so, one question dominates all the others: what happened to Gregory? Horus, visibly injured and breathing with difficulty, tries to explain the situation. With great effort, he reveals that the ice dragon attacked and ended up killing Gregory. The revelation hits the group like a blow. Silence and shock fill the surroundings. Someone then questions if he is talking about the same dragon that Miria had brought earlier. The possibility seems far too absurd to accept immediately, but Horus insists that there is no mistake. He states that he saw everything happen with his own eyes. The ice dragon really killed Gregory, and the problem does not end there. After the battle, the creature started to change. Its body began to grow in a strange way, as if something unusual was happening to it. Upon hearing that, everyone becomes even more uneasy. A transformation like that can only indicate one thing: evolution. Even without fully understanding what happened, Horus says that he witnessed the monster fighting against another ice dragon before flying away toward the east. The tension rises instantly. Some people begin cursing the monsters, furious about the situation. In the middle of the chaos, suspicion even appears that Ursha might somehow be related to Gregory's death. Miria reacts immediately and rejects that idea. But before the argument grows stronger, someone interrupts the discussion. That is not the moment for fights or accusations. There are more urgent matters to resolve. The priority now is taking care of Horus. His wounds need to be treated as soon as possible. Without wasting time, the group organizes themselves to carry him and begin the treatment. Meanwhile, some people from the village are gathered using their abilities to care for the injured. They focus their power on healing techniques to try stabilizing those who were hurt during the attack. The situation is still tense, but little by little some of the wounded begin to improve thanks to the collective effort. During that moment, one of the girls looks around and notices something strange. She then asks where Miria is. After observing more carefully, she realizes that the girl is no longer there. That is when she understands that Miria left without anyone noticing, probably heading toward the place of the battle. The scene changes once again to the dragon, who is still facing the terrible monster. The fight continues intensely, and he begins to feel how difficult it is to hold back that powerful creature. Even with his new form, containing the beast demands a lot of effort. Realizing that he needed to change his strategy, the dragon decides to use one of his special abilities to try to control the enemy. He activates his poison power, releasing the toxin against the monster. Gradually, he notices that the effect begins to appear. The beast seems to become slower, as if it were being affected by a strange drowsiness. Taking advantage of that opportunity, the dragon observes the enemy's body more carefully and notices an important detail. The creature's neck is relatively thin compared to the rest of its body, which might be a vulnerable point. Without wasting time, he focuses strength into his arm and begins striking that specific area repeatedly. Each blow is delivered with more force than the previous one, reinforcing the impact to break through the monster's resistance. After several well-calculated attacks, the dragon finally manages to hit the critical point. With one final powerful strike, he manages to defeat the beast. As soon as the enemy falls, a message appears confirming the victory and informing that he received 383 experience points for the battle. He rises from level 1 to level 19, and he collapses onto the ground right after. The level of the Dragon Punch skill rises rapidly, going from level 1 straight to level 19. Exhausted and almost without strength, he looks at the result of the battle and can barely believe what has just happened. struggling to speak. He admits that he managed to win. The enemy has been defeated. While trying to recover his breath, his eyes meet Miria. She approaches carefully, observing the enormous dragon in front of her. Miria asks if he is Earthia. He is surprised that she realized it. She keeps looking at the gigantic body of the dragon and comments that he defeated the dragon punch. Besides that, he seems even bigger than before. The only possible explanation is that he must have evolved again. Earthia confirms it. After the fight, everything changed. He also admits something heavy. Gregory died during the confrontation. It was at that moment that his form changed in that way. Before the conversation continues, Mariel appears and raises her hand, ready to attack. Miria notices the danger and tries to stop her. She asks Mariel not to act on impulse and tells everyone to wait for a moment. But Mariel is determined. For her, that dragon is responsible for Gregory's death and needs to be eliminated. Miria insists that that dragon is Earthia, the same one she had spoken about before. Even if he has changed in size and appearance, she says she has no doubts. Mariel remains suspicious. Gregory's death weighs too heavily to simply ignore. Miria then shouts, asking everyone to stop. She states with conviction that Earthia would never do something like that on purpose. Silence takes over the place for a few seconds. Earthia looks at Miria and asks, with some hesitation, if she truly believes in him. Miria does not answer immediately. That pause is enough for Earthia to understand the situation. He lowers his head, realizing that the distance between them now feels enormous. In a low voice, he admits something painful. He can no longer stay near her. He calls himself a monster. Miria tries to call him, but it is already too late. Earthia begins to move away slowly. Before leaving, he looks at her one last time. And then he says goodbye. Goodbye, Miria. After moving away, Earthia continues walking alone. While observing his own body, he realizes how strong he has become. His strength increased greatly, but that also brought a huge burden to his body. He wonders if he will ever get used to this new form. While walking, his eyes find some flowers growing on the ground. He notices something curious. He had never paid attention to flowers before, but those catch his attention. There are red and white flowers mixed among the vegetation. They grow only in places where monsters live, which makes them rare and difficult to find. Even so, they are beautiful. Earthia remembers the meaning connected to them. It is said that those flowers represent courage. Courage, something that also reminds him of the word hero. He thinks about his own name, Earthia. He remembers that this is also the name of one of the favorite flowers of someone important. While he reflects about that, a message appears in front of him warning that the name cannot be changed after being chosen. Courage, hero. These words begin to weigh inside his mind. He shakes his head. He tells himself that he cannot carry a name like that. He begins to call himself an idiot several times, frustrated with everything that happened. Then several questions arise inside his mind. What did he really want to be? What was he trying to do? Why did he reach that point? While he keeps walking, he begins to hear strange noises around him, but he decides to ignore them. The sound appears again. He keeps telling himself that it does not matter. Even when the noise repeats several times, he insists on not paying attention. Deep down, his mind is still stuck on the same questions. Who is he really now? And what should he do from this moment onward? While he thinks about that, one final message appears in front of him. It asks him to declare his name, Ainara. As he lies down, he begins to hear a sound approaching, but he does not care and decides to sleep anyway. Meanwhile, most of the villagers had managed to escape to the western side of the village, narrowly avoiding the disaster. Even so, not everyone had made it. Some were still missing, and that could not be ignored. The decision was immediate. With no room for hesitation, it was necessary to search for them as quickly as possible. Miria joined the search without thinking twice. Determined to help in any way she could. She knew the village well, every path, every detail, and that made her extremely useful in that situation. And so, the rescue operation began, driven by urgency and the hope of finding survivors. Meanwhile, Aluja was facing something completely different, something far more internal and disturbing. In front of the black lizard, he clearly realized how much he had changed. His own growth had made him almost unrecognizable, both physically and mentally. For a brief moment, his consciousness had been lost, as if he had disconnected from reality, and when he finally returned, the truth struck him with overwhelming force. He was the dragon responsible for the attack on the village. There was no denying it. Gregory's death rested directly on his shoulders, a burden impossible to ignore or justify. Remaining close to humans now became unfeasible. The risk of losing control again and ending up hurting those who were still important to him was simply too great. It was a risk he could not take. That was why he made a painful but necessary decision. He would leave that forest behind. He would distance himself from everything and everyone. Even so, there was something he needed to resolve before leaving. The memory of Doze appeared in his mind, clear and persistent. A being without a name, without memories, empty. Illusia would not allow those who had accepted him to suffer the same cruel fate. He wanted to protect them, to ensure that they could live in peace. Far from all of that. That was his decision, firm and unshakable. Illusia's decision began to shape his next steps. His thoughts then turned toward the future. The cave, perhaps it was no longer even possible to return there with his new size, with the body he now possessed. But before he could move forward, something changed once again. A sensation passed through him suddenly. A new ability awakened within him, presence detection. And what he felt through that ability was not something ordinary. It was a monstrous presence, dense, filled with danger, something completely outside the norm, different from anything he had ever faced. When he tried to analyze it, even his abilities failed to provide complete answers, as if that existence was beyond his comprehension. However, that anomaly was not entirely unfamiliar. He had encountered something similar before. The slime, the same creature he had ignored in the past, a decision that had led to regret. Now, everything began to connect in an unsettling way. Doze, Mahawolf, and that being, all of them shared the same disturbing abnormality. It was not a coincidence. It could not be, and worse still, that presence was heading directly toward the village. The enemy's abilities were absurd, surpassing any expectation. Magic wave transmission, an ability that Mahawolf also possessed. But it did not stop there. Scissors, needles, turtle shell, spider web, completely incompatible abilities, which did not belong to a normal slime. The truth began to reveal itself in a clear and terrifying way. That creature stole abilities from other beings, and more than that, it controlled everything around it. The memory of what had emerged from Doe's mouth confirmed that suspicion. There were no more doubts. That being was responsible for everything, for the destruction of the village, for the tragedy that had unfolded. Illusia could not allow that to continue. Even if they were few, there were still people important to him. Miria, the black lizard, and the others. Bonds he could no longer ignore. Deep down, he finally accepted it. He was a hero. Even if he was only a small hero, he was still one, and that was enough. The decision was made. That would be the final battle. The confrontation began with tension in the air. If the situation worsened, the order was clear: flee without hesitation. The initial attack was not lethal, designed only to cause temporary blindness, a strategy to gain advantage and observe the enemy's behavior. But then, something went wrong. The scene changed abruptly and unexpectedly. Perception became distorted, as if reality itself was being manipulated. Children who had been present disappeared without leaving any trace, as if they had never been there. The confusion quickly increased, making everything even more chaotic. It became clear that the enemy would not be easy to face. And then, the revelation emerged: there were two, but only one presence was detected by his abilities, creating a dangerous discrepancy. Even after evolving, the enemy still showed some instability in its own abilities. Even so, its regeneration was absurd, almost limitless, a direct result of the countless abilities stolen from different creatures in that forest. The conclusion was inevitable and alarming. It would be necessary to defeat it with a single decisive blow. The dialogue began. But there was no room for true understanding. The creature showed awareness, intelligence, and something even worse: cruelty. It provoked, manipulated, played with words in a calculated way. Its speech revealed disturbing fragments of its nature. Humans had been consumed. Lives were treated as simple resources, disposable. The final confirmation came without leaving any doubt. That monster had used humans as bait. It had manipulated events from the very beginning. It had caused destruction simply to collect even more abilities. Illusia's anger intensified, burning deep within her. There was no room for forgiveness, even in the face of constant provocation. She refused to accept any kind of comparison. She was not like that creature. She would never be. Meanwhile, the enemy remained cold, completely indifferent. Its objective was clear and direct: to go to the village and to collect even more abilities without any consideration. The enemy's proposal echoed with disturbing coldness. A cruel competition, based on destruction and death, was presented as if it were something entertaining, a simple game. Illusia rejected it without hesitation, without even considering it. There was no space for doubt, fear, or hesitation. Her decision was absolute, firm, and unshakable. She would defeat it, no matter the cost. The presence of Illusia flickered for an instant, as if it had disappeared, but her voice returned, firm, reaffirming her identity. She was the dragon who had protected the village, and she would continue fighting. The battle intensified. Without accepting any negotiation, Illusia charged forward with everything she had. Her scorching breath tore across the battlefield, followed by a precise strike that hit the target directly. The impact was devastating. For a brief moment, victory seemed certain. During the confrontation, her power evolved. Her ability expanded, elevating her potential even further. Everything indicated that this was the final blow, but the illusion did not last. The enemy rose as if nothing had happened. Its resistance surpassed all logic. It was like facing something impossible to destroy. Meanwhile, far from there, the allies continued their search for survivors. Concern for Illusia grew with every passing moment. Even so, there was something deeper guiding their actions. Filcia's transformation remained shrouded in mystery, and the need to understand the truth spoke louder than anything else. Even in the face of the danger represented by one of the three great beasts of catastrophe, the decision was made. They would go to her, not out of duty, but for the truth. Back on the battlefield, the situation became even more abnormal. The enemy changed form, its body distorted, taking on a grotesque appearance, half human, half an amorphous mass. Illusia analyzed carefully, trying to identify a vital point. With no clear answers, her strategy became simple: attack until nothing remained. But once again, it did not work. The revelation came in a cruel way. The creature's entire body was its core. There was no obvious weak point. There were no openings. The enemy's irritation grew. It abandoned any trace of patience and declared its intention to kill Illusia, absorbing all of her abilities. Even so, she did not retreat. The battle reached a new level. The enemy began to combine stolen abilities, creating extremely destructive attacks. The power released was overwhelming. Illusia prepared herself to endure the impact and strike back, fully accepting the risk. She was ready to bet everything. And then, at the most critical moment, the black lizard returned with a precise and unexpected attack. It struck the enemy with a powerful poison, something that should not have worked, something that defied even the creature's absurd resistance. The effect was immediate. For the first time, the enemy showed surprise. An opening appeared. Illusia did not waste the opportunity. Suddenly, the lizard ended up being caught by the monster. The dragon was startled and rushed forward so that she could rescue her companion, but she ended up getting trapped together with the monster inside a sphere of light. And that is how episode 11 comes to an end.